Hey everyone, Kyrix here. I have decided to do one of those rant things I do every once in a while. As you can no doubt tell by the picture here, we're gonna talk Star Wars today. Yeah. So I spent about 5 minutes setting this up. Keep in mind, I'm working with very low-end equipment, so my editing is kind of garbage, especially since I'm not editing. But we're gonna go with that. I don't think you can hear my fan in the background, but if you are, I kind of got to keep the room ventilated, because between me, all my electronics, and 5 animals, all of whom have body temperatures higher than a human being, my room gets hot fast. Like, the house can be 77, and my room can be 82 degrees, kind of fast. So, I have to keep it ventilated. Anyway. With the release of the new Solo movie, which I still haven't seen, I'll see it eventually, just because. I'm gonna say right now, I'm not enthused to see it. Not because of all the SJW stuff that I've heard, but because I've never really liked Han Solo as a character. I don't hate him, and there are writers who can do him so well. Like, there are some books, Scoundrels, for example, by Timothy Zahn. I actually met the guy, and yes, I will keep bringing that up, but when I met him, I mentioned he's one of the few people who can write Han Solo in a way that I want to read it. Because I've made no secret of the fact that I watch Star Wars for space wizards and laser swords. I'm in it for Jedi, period. Because I can get smugglers anywhere. I can get hotshot fighter pilots anywhere. I gotta come to Star Wars to get Jedi, though. You know? I mean, it's not like, well, I can turn into Star Trek and get a Jedi. No, I can't. I really can't. If I want fighter pilots, I could watch, like, Wing Commander or The Last Starfighter or something like that. I'm sure there's movies with smugglers that just don't come to mind, and to be honest, a lot of them are now based off of Han Solo because, you know, pop culture. But there's also the fact that I've read the novels, and I don't know if this movie can outperform some of the novels I read. Like, again, Scoundrels comes to mind. The Millennium Falcon book, which was old canon, which just goes into detail about the long, rather heroic history of the Falcon. And I'm not saying heroic in the sense that, oh, it did all these great things, but in the sense that it is a truly epic ship. It has been in so much things and survived so much crap, you know? It's really impressive. But, yeah, with the Solo movie, it's brought up the Star Wars fans talking again about, oh, this sucks, this sucks. The woman, and I don't know her name, because I'm not good with actors and actresses. I'm not even good with the ones I like, much less ones that are in one movie I've seen. But the actress who played Rose in The Last Jedi has apparently been harassed. And, quite frankly, that's bullshit. Look, I don't like Rose. Rose is probably my second least favorite character in all of Star Wars. But you don't take it out on the actress for that. But again, that's neither here nor there. What I'm getting at is the fact that people are bringing this up, and mostly the SJWs are snapping back with, "Oh, Star Wars has a toxic fan base." And quite frankly, they do, but not for the reasons you think. Like, I've recently, like, I just watched, I think it was I Love Comics do a big video on Maya. Be careful, Pop. She's wrestling with the cat, and the cat popped her. But he was doing a video on the whole thing with Chuck Wendig apparently just railing into Star Wars fans, calling them white supremacists and all that shit. I'm like, dude, it doesn't mean shit if the name you call someone has nothing to do with them. Like, you know, it's so stupid, quite frankly, that I don't even have an analogy for it. It's like me saying, well, I don't like salad. Oh, you don't like salad because you hate boats. That That has nothing to do with salad. You know, I don't like Star Wars. You're a white supremacist. No. Not really at all. But anyway, what I'm going to get into here is I'm going to go over a list of characters. And I'll get to that in a minute. But let me preface this with the Star Wars has a toxic fan base thing. And I wrote something similar to this in the guy's comment section. And the funny thing is, I did it halfway through the video, and then I watched the rest of the video, and at the very end he's like, now, if you happen to agree with Chuck Wendig, say so in the comics, but please write something other than just, he's right. You know, tell me why. And I had, by that point, written like 5 paragraphs. So, we'll see. But, okay, so let's preface this. I have been in the Star Wars fandom hardcore since the 5th grade, which, by my admittedly shoddy math, I put to about 25 years. And by the way, how I do that is I remember that I turned 6 in kindergarten and count up from that. So that gets me roundabouts to that age. And the reason I remember it was 5th grade is because I remember one of the kids in my class was also into Star Wars, and he brought in Star Wars toys, and every day we would talk Star Wars, because I sat, like, right behind him. And that's... I had, to a certain extent, always been into Star Wars without knowing it. Like, I had a bunch of Star Wars toys. I had an Empire Strikes Back sleeping bag. I didn't know what the hell it was, but I had it. And one of my first real full-on concrete entries into the Star Wars fandom was, we were at a garage sale, and I was bought the Return of the Jedi storybook, which is basically a large hardcover book, and I say large in terms of height, not in thickness. It was a pretty thin book that you'd give to children. Big picture book, had the story. It was very summarized, but you hit all the beats, you know. You learn all the important shit via the book that you would catch in the movie. It's basically like watching a 10-minute summary of Return of the Jedi, if I could sum that up that way. But it was in the 5th grade when I started getting into the movies and the video games and the toys and all this shit, and just really hardcore Star Wars. So I've been in this for a while. And people, whenever I mention liking the prequels, they're like, oh, you just grew up with the prequels. Bitch, I grew up with fucking Return of the Jedi. I grew up with the whole original trilogy. I grew up playing Super Star Wars. I grew up playing the fucking Decipher card game. Don't tell me what Star Wars I fucking grew up with. The thing is, I made a choice, because I do not like thinking what people tell me to think. Sometimes I end up that way, but not because they told me to. Now, the analogy I used with the whole Chuck Wendig thing is basically saying, Chuck's right about Star Wars having a toxic fan base, but not why. It's like, oh, they're racists and transphobes, and they're white supremacists, and they're incels, and they're MGTOWs, and all this shit. And I'm like, that's like saying, Hitler was a horrible person. He was a vegetarian. What more proof do you need? Well, Hitler was a horrible person, and he was a vegetarian. But the reason he's a horrible person is that whole, you know, wiping out an entire race of people thing. That kind of rates a little higher on the scale than I would like the salad, please. And in case you're wondering, that was my brain deciding to try a German accent and my mouth giving up immediately on it. It's like, I'm not going to be arsed to do a German accent. Arsed? What the fuck, am I British now? So. And I mentioned, like, you will, no matter what, and it's very rare, I can probably name on one fucking hand the number of people I can talk Star Wars to that are actual Star Wars fans, like they've done more than watch the movies kind of shit. Because you hear people say, oh, I'm fans of Star Wars. Oh, what's your favorite book? There are books? You know? No, I don't. If you... And yes, this is me being really elitist. If you just watch the movies, I don't consider you a Star Wars fan. Because I've used this analogy before, and I've had this argument. People tried to tell me, you shouldn't have to do homework to like something. And I'm like, if you like something, it's not homework. You know? If you only watch Star Wars movies, given the expansive media franchise that it is, that is the same as watching the season premiere of a show and saying that you watched the whole show. That's like, say, oh, here's Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm going to watch Encounter at Farpoint. Wow, Season 1 was weird. What was your favorite episode? Well, I only watched Encounter at Farpoint. Well, then how do you know it was weird? Because that was a weird episode, man. Space jellyfish. Fucking John Delancey's a god. That kind of thing. Because, I'm sorry, the movies may set the original stage, but they are very little to the canon now. Because you probably hear that and think, what? I'm sorry. Going just based off the old pre-Disney canon, the shit they did in the movies kind of pales in comparison to the shit they did in the books. Like, let's talk about the Sun Crusher. They blew up 2 Death Stars in the movie, that's a big deal. Well, the Sun Crusher was a more or less impervious starship. It was indestructible. And it was, let's say, shuttle-sized. Because it describes it being like a fighter. I've seen pictures. It looks bigger than that. It looks like about the size of a shuttle. And at one point, you've got Han and this kid called Kip Duran and Chewie and I think maybe someone else in the Sun Crusher, and they're trying to escape. And there's a Star Destroyer in the way. So Kip just runs through the fucking thing and blows up the Star Destroyer using the Sun Crusher as a torpedo. And you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of cool, but why is it so dangerous? Because the Death Star could blow up a planet. But the Sun Crusher does what its name suggests. It fires a torpedo into the sun and supernovas it, wiping out the whole solar system. And that was part of a 3-part book series. The Jedi Academy trilogy. And here's the kicker. It was an afterthought. It was the B-plot of that thing. The real plot was Luke trying to set up the Jedi Academy, and, spoilers, trying to get Kip to come back from the dark side. And, I'm sorry, Palpatine's Death Star is kind of pale in comparison to the threat of the Sun Crusher. Because you could blow up a Death Star. That first time with Galen Erso's little weak point, you could do what the Rebellion did. You could send a bunch of snub fighters in there and torpedo that fucker. The second one, it wasn't finished. They flew a freighter into the superstructure and nuked the core. Sun Crusher? You can't do shit to that. Torpedoes? Lasers? Capital ships? It doesn't care. The best you can do is shoot its guns off, but when the ship itself is a gun, and the torpedoes are recessed so you can't shoot them, what the hell can you do? Except hope it eventually runs out of ammo before you run out of star systems that matter. Because one of the things Kip did was he went to Kyrix, which was, in the old canon, the big Stormtrooper place. It was like Stormtrooper Central. It was one of the most imperially loyal planets in the entire Empire. Next to Coruscant at the time. And even after the Empire was overthrown, it stayed loyal. And that's where all the best Stormtroopers came from. Well, Kip went there and nuked it with the Sun Crusher by shooting that place's star. So, yeah. And you want to talk like the prequels even. Some of the books had a lot more going on than the movies did. Okay, get down, Maya. Get down. Like, no, get all the way down. Go, 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 go. Like, for example, Maya, get down! The Cestus Deception. Get down! The Cestus Deception would have been a good movie on par with how Attack of the Clones went, with the whole mystery arc. Because it was Obi-Wan Kenobi and Kit Fisto being sent to uncover this new droid called the Jedi Killer. And it didn't necessarily live up to its name. They had a test run of it. The company wanted to sell some to the Republic. And they had I think it was Kit, fight the JK. And he beat it. But if there had been two of them, he'd have gotten his ass whooped. You know? And the interesting thing about the JK was it was force sensitive. And I'm not going to get into why it was force sensitive. It's all explained in the book. And it has to do with why it's called the Cestus Deception. But that would have made a fantastic movie. The Thrawn trilogy would have made a fantastic movie. You know? So, the movies are the smallest part of the canon. The Clone Wars cartoon, just the 3 years that the Clone Wars takes place in, was a much bigger part than any one movie. Rebels was a big 4-year-long arc of the story. The new Disney canon books are pretty big too, you know. So the movies are just... It's like arguing over how good a show is by comparing the theme songs, you know. So, let's get into these character talks, and let's hit this character first. You know him, and you probably don't love him. Jar Binks. Now, to the casual Star Wars fan, and by that I mean the movie-going public, this is, hands down, the worst character in all of Star Wars. He has no redeeming qualities, he's offensive, he's stupid, he's annoying, he's trying to be funny, and he fails at it. And, I disagree. Let's go into this. First off, the offensive thing with the whole, oh, that accent. Okay. Have you ever talked to a Japanese person? And I don't mean American-born. I mean, they're from Japan and they come over here. I haven't. All the Japanese and any kind of Asians that I've spoken to were American-born. I met them in school, so they had flawless American accents. But I've seen, both in TV and in actual Japanese animes, what it sounds like when a Japanese person tries to speak English and it's not their native language. There's a show called Tokyo Mew Mew. We had it released as Mew Mew Power. It's one of the magical girl animes. And in English, there was an episode where there was this foreign girl who spoke, I want to say Spanish, but it might have been French. And in actual Tokyo Mew Mew, the Japanese version, she spoke English. And 2 or 3 of the characters spoke English to her. And their accents were so thick that I could barely make out what they said. Like, the girl who was supposed to be a native English speaker sounded really bad, and the guy who was supposed to be a really good English speaker had an accent so thick it sounded like he was eating while he was talking. And I, as a native English speaker, could barely make out what he said. You know? But if you hear him in Japanese, it's flawless, rapid fire, to the point where, as a friend of mine has described in other animes, you don't know how they can talk that fast and not swallow their own tongue. Well, here's the thing with Jar Jar and the other Gungans. They're speaking Basic. The Gungans have their own language. We never hear it, but they do have one. And that's their native tongue. So when they speak Basic, it doesn't sound right. And, for example, if I were to speak Japanese to you, knowing what little I do about Japanese, or what little I know about French, and you're a native speaker, I'm going to sound retarded. I might have all the words right, but I'll put them in the wrong fucking order or something, because languages do not necessarily follow. Like, just introducing myself. In Japan, it's last name first, then first name. In America, it's first name, then last name. So if you are unfamiliar with America, and I talk to you, and you're Japanese, you're going to think my last name is my first name, and vice versa. And you're going to be really offended when I call you by your first name all the time, which is something that is done to people who are familiar with you, like close friends and such. Just because that's how it works in America. You know? So, When Jar Jar says, Misa Jar Jar Binks, he doesn't think he's saying that. He thinks he says, hi, I'm Jar Jar Binks. But he doesn't speak basic, so you get Misa Jar Jar Binks. And that's just how that works. And as for the stupid thing, he's really not. He's actually, if you watch the movies, and especially the Clone Wars, he is extremely, almost terrifyingly clever. And we're not going to get into that whole stupid Sith Lord conspiracy. That was the dumbest fucking thing I ever heard. I realize it was just fans having fun, but when people started taking it seriously, I'm like, no, you're an idiot. But he does all sorts of shit in the Clone Wars cartoon where he actually realizes, hey, I'm clumsy, let me weaponize this. You know? And he served an important role. Jar Jar both saved and doomed the Republic. Or he saved Naboo and doomed the Republic. Because, A, he was the guy who made the vote to start the Clone Wars. You know, and it really sucks to go down in history as the guy who started that shit. But, Darth Maul would still be alive if not for Jar Jar Binks. Because, and I know that sounds really dumb, but work with me here. Padme did not know what she was going to do. She hit a roadblock in the Senate. Shit was not going down. And Jar Jar, being from Naboo, was either visiting her, because they were both in the same world, or had similar quarters to her, and happened to mention casually, you know, my people are warriors. We have a grand army. And she just kind of looked at him, and he talked to her in detail about the Gungan army, and she hatched the brainstorm, I'm going to go to Naboo. I'm going to speak to the Gungans. I will get on my knees and beg them if I have to. And we will save our world together. And that's exactly what happened. And the whole thing about Jar Jar being clumsy, he says flat out, that's his problem. He is clumsy. The Gungans themselves are rather ferocious warriors. I mean, watch them in the movie and watch them in the Clone Wars. They don't fuck around. Think of this. The Gungans are one of the few races in Star Wars, the other one being the Mon Calamari and the Wookiees, that have a standing army. No one else really does. You know? So I don't think he's a bad character. I think he was poorly implemented. And I think, while I enjoy his humor, he falls flat for a lot of people, kind of like another character that I'm going to get into later. So, we're gonna get off the Jar Jar train and talk about a character who has the opposite problem. Darth Vader. This man is hyped up beyond all reason. And when I watched Rogue One, there's a scene in Rogue One, and I feel confident not giving a spoiler tag for this because it's been a couple years. You've probably seen it by now. There's a scene at the very end of Rogue One where he captures the vessel that Leia's vessel's actually inside, and he activates his lightsaber, and he goes on this little couple minutes, like 2 to 5 minutes, rampage, and that's really the only word for it, where he is just this unstoppable engine of destruction, killing everything in his path. And I looked at that, and I told people, I'm like, wow, it's so good after all these decades to finally see Darth Vader being badass. They're like, what are you talking about? Vader's always been a badass. I'm like, no, he hasn't. Vader's never done shit. And then I go into detail. Let's talk. A New Hope. What did Vader do? He broke a rebel's neck. That's cool, right? It would be if he weren't disarmed at the time and surrounded by troopers with their guns pointed at him. He was a captive. He was an unarmed captive. Vader picked him up, snapped his neck, and threw him aside. Big man, Vader. Big man. He choked the shit out of some guy. Didn't kill him, but he choked him. Sounds cool, right? The guy was on his side. Yeah, that was one of his subordinates. He choked the fuck out of him. Tarkin had to make him let go. Yeah. He, let's see. he beat a Jedi Master in a lightsaber fight. That's got to be cool, right? Problem was, Obi-Wan let him win. He beat him because Obi-Wan stopped fighting back. He literally held his lightsaber up and let him hit him. Yeah. He shot down a bunch of rebels in the Death Star trench. Sounds good, right? Well, here's the thing. The trench is narrow. Not as narrow as it looks, but it's narrow, so there's no room to maneuver. And they couldn't shoot back because he was behind them, and they physically couldn't turn around without abandoning the run. So he killed an unarmed prisoner, choked someone who worked for him, defeated a guy in a fight who had stopped fighting, and shot down a bunch of people who couldn't dodge or shoot back. Batting 1,000 there, Vader. Let's scroll into the next movie. Maybe he does better there. He kills 2 people. Yeah, 2. Admiral Ozzel. Oh, that sounds cool. He killed an admiral? It was an Imperial admiral, though. Yeah, one of his own guys. He came out of hyperspace early, warned the rebels by doing so, and Vader choked the fuck out of him. He also choked a captain. Captain Nita. Captain of one of his Star Destroyers. So yeah, that's 2 on-screen deaths, and they're both his own dudes. Well, shit, that's bad. Most people would get fired for that. Oh, he also blew up a capital ship. Can't forget that he blew up a capital ship. Problem was, it was a Star Destroyer. Why did it blow up? Because he sent it into an asteroid field after a freighter. A freighter carrying high-ranking but not important members of the rebellion that he could have sent and did send TIE fighters after, which also got blown up. So, lot of on-screen deaths at Vader's hands, and they're all on his side in this movie. Someone tried to point out, oh, he won the Battle of Hoth. No. General Veers won the Battle of Hoth. Or was it Colonel Veers? Veers, either way. Vader showed up after everyone had left, pretty much. He got the stragglers. The stragglers of the stragglers, really. And he defeated... I can't even make this one sound good. He beat an untrained Padawan and cut off his hand. Yeah, I tried to make the other one sound good to throw you off, but there's really no... There's no putting makeup on that pig. Luke didn't know... Luke, at best, had 4 months of training. It was probably more closer to, like, 8 or 9 weeks of training as a Jedi, compared to Vader, who, at that point, we found out was Anakin Skywalker, one of the greatest swordsmen the Order had produced. There was no way Luke was winning that fight. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. And in the third movie, he fought Luke again. Luke hadn't really been trained much more. He self-taught a lot of stuff, but he didn't receive any more formal training than he did on Cloud City. And Vader lost. Got his hand cut off. And then he threw his boss down an elevator shaft and died. So, if you just watch the movies, and this is why I say the movies are the smallest part of the canon, if you just watch the movies, Vader's a chump. He's all flash and no substance. That being said, if you follow other media, if you play the video games, if you read the books, the comics, etc., he is every bit the monster everyone thought he was. He is terrifyingly powerful. He's a juggernaut. He's almost unstoppable. And he has every bit the deserved reputation that he's had over the years. But you don't know that unless you watch the movies. And even that moment in Rogue One was, at best, 5 minutes of awesome out of 4 movies of Vader. So, the man's all hype. And he serves to illustrate why the movies are the least important part of the franchise to me. Because if you are a fan of Vader, there's no reason for it other than he looks cool. Because he doesn't do shit. All the shit Vader did that didn't actually involve the Force is something that You could plug any other Imperial in. You could put Tarkin and Vader Starfighter in the Death Star and he'd have had the same results. You know? Because he was shooting people from behind who couldn't dodge or shoot back. I could make those shots. So let's move on. We talked Vader. Let's talk Luke. Now, Luke, in The Last Jedi, has received a lot of criticism. Some of it from Mark Hamill himself. And I love you, Mark. I do. You're awesome. You're a great voice actor. You're a fun actor. You didn't age well, although the beard helps. But, talk about Luke wouldn't do that. Luke wouldn't do that. Luke has done that in the books. There's a book called Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor. And in that book, Luke is just completely crushed as a person. He finds a reporter. Or, he's either a reporter or a journalist. I'm going to go with reporter. And basically, the reporter is an Imperial sympathizer. He's in the New Republic, but he is a heavy Imperial sympathizer. Like, he doesn't like them, he works for them, but he hates them kind of person. And Luke seeks the guy out and says, I want you to tell my story. I'm going to tell you a story of a mission I had, and I want you to tell the world about this. He's like, are you crazy? I hate you. I think you're an asshole. Why would you have me do this? I'm going to write the biggest hit piece in the world. And Luke's like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I deserve. And Luke has just lost all confidence in himself. He's lost all faith in himself. He thinks he's a monster. Because on Mindor, he did something unforgivable, something so terrible, he could never forgive himself for it. And the whole galaxy needs to know what a heinous monster Luke Skywalker really is. And here's a spoiler right now. The thing Luke Skywalker did that was so monstrous was there was this guy who had... I'm going to summarize this. He basically had this crystal armor that he put on people that let him control them. And he could control the way the crystals grew. And Luke basically had to do something that in order to stop these guys, it would kill them. And there were... I'm probably off base here. I'm going to say there were 200 of them. There could have been more. There could have been like 40, you know. We're going to say 200. The number doesn't matter. It's what happens that matters. Luke, to do what needed to be done, I want to stress there was no other option. This was a do-or-die thing. He had to do this. Luke killed all of them at once with the Force. Again, we're not talking Luke did this because he wanted to save time. Luke did this because of a moment of anger. No, there is no Jedi in the entire Order that would not have done this because this was the only thing that could be done. And when he did this, he did the Force equivalent of holding their hand as they died. He basically kept his mind touching theirs so that none of them died alone. So let's reiterate at this. Luke killed a bunch of soldiers who he couldn't have saved and stayed with them while they died. And because he did that, he thinks he committed some sort of horrific atrocity. So you don't think him in a moment of weakness thinking about killing his nephew wouldn't drive him to exile? Sorry, kiddo. I've seen him fall a lot harder for a lot less. And you might think, well, Kyrix, this is the guy who against all odds redeemed his father and he turned on his nephew? Watch it again. Watch that scene again. Luke has exactly 1 second where he ignites his lightsaber and gives in to fear and thinks, I have to stop him. And that's the second that Ben Solo wakes up and sees him, thinks he's about to die, and fights back, and Luke just has to defend himself, and he never really gets to say, wait, this is a misunderstanding, before Ben drops the ceiling on his ass. You know? It was a 1 second moment of weakness. We've all had them. I had one that to this day fucking haunts me. I was a freshman in high school, and we were moving from the woods back down into civilization, as it were. And my cat, I had to hold her because we didn't really have a carrier at the time, and I had to keep her in the car. And she was getting mean and vicious and bitey with me. Like, tearing me up. Like, I had scratches and bite marks all over me. I think I might have been bleeding a little bit. And I was getting real fed up with it. And I thought, never did I do this. My brain chipped in with, just open the door and let her go. I didn't act on it. I didn't even think to act on it. But I thought it. Only for about 2 seconds. And then the rest of my brain immediately slapped the shit out of that side of my brain and said, this is my baby. I cannot abandon her. How dare I even think that? The fact that I even thought that, to this day, fucks with me. I want to point out that cat died 13 years ago, and I'm still feeling guilty about that. That thought. Not action. Thought. So, you think someone with, like Luke, whose action caused the deaths of all his students, or most of his students, and basically the recruitment of the rest, and pretty much plunged the galaxy into chaos, you think that wouldn't fuck with him enough that he might just throw his hands up in the air and said, I'm more trouble than I'm worth? Because I do. I have no trouble believing that. And the question's been asked, well, if you came out there to die, why leave a map? Because Luke is kind of a duty-bound little creature. He is, quite frankly, at times he's a whiny little bitch. Give me just a second here. Okay, I'm still good. He's always been a whiny little bitch. Look back to, episode 4. He's just this whiny, smart-mouthed little shit. In episode 5, he has his moments of calm, but there's still that whiny little brat under there. It takes until Return of the Jedi for him to bury that for good. The Luke from episode 4 and the Luke from episode 6 are not the same man. They are completely different people, and that's understandable, and that's a good thing. But deep down, that kid's still in there. That whiny little shit who just wants to go pick up those power converters. He's still in there. Jedi Master or no. He never grew out of that. So, I think that what happened was he knew there might be a call for him, so he left that map. Hid it very well, but he hid the map. And then, once he got there, he just had more time to think and stew in his own guilt with none of his friends there to talk him out of it. And just gave up. So we talked Luke. Let's move on to the other major Skywalker, Anakin. Now, everyone says Anakin's a whiny little shit, and he is. Of course, the same people who say that are the people who forget that Luke was the same way. And unlike Anakin, Luke didn't have any real badass moments, because I should have talked about this during the Luke segment, but Luke ruined literally everything he touched. I mean, he had this high tendency to botch everything. He didn't do a whole lot. And what he did do, he usually had help for. But he didn't defeat Vader. He redeemed him. But not because... Mostly because he was being tortured to death at the time. But Anakin is a prime example of why the movies are the smallest part of the canon. If you watch the movies, if you watch episode 1, 2, and 3, it's hard to feel bad for Anakin Skywalker when he falls. It's hard to feel that that's anything... It's hard to feel that that's a tragedy for anyone other than the Jedi. Just, oh, it's tragic that all the Jedi died. When really what it's tragic for is Anakin, because if you watch the Clone Wars, you see the hero that he really was. And he was an absolute hero. He was a rather selfless person. About the only way you could get him to even consider himself is when you involved the people closest to him. Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Padme, R2, and Rex. And of course Chancellor Palpatine. So you take those 6 people, you put them in danger, and he will literally do... He will bend physics to save them. And Anakin was a very reckless fighter. A very reckless leader. But here's the thing. He was always the first one in a battle. Yes, Anakin will tell you to fucking charge this giant droid. But he'll tell you as he's charging that giant droid, he'll yell, "Follow me, let's get this thing." So he did lead from the front. He absolutely did. And it ate him up to not be on the front. Because the idea of sending people in to do something that he knew he could do, he didn't delegate well. He didn't delegate well at all. He was very much a helicopter parent for a while with Ahsoka until she proved herself well enough that she could do her own thing. But, let's talk Episode 3. Episode 3 is the perfect example, and this is one of the things I get into a huge argument with people over, of why you need to absorb all the media. Because when you watch Episode 3, there's the whole scene of, we will give you a seat on the council, but we do not confer to you the rank of master. You see this, and you see Anakin's temper tantrum, and you think, oh, he's just a little shithead. He just wants to be a Jedi Master. No, read the book. If you read the book, which tells you what's going on in his head, he, at that point in time, is seriously considering leaving the Order forever, just gone. He doesn't want to be a Jedi anymore. He just wants to be a husband. He wants to marry. He wants to not only be married to Padme, but let the universe know he's married to Padme. Let the two of them be together in public and raise their new child that's being born. That's all he wants. And by this point, with Palpatine poisoning him towards the Jedi, he's getting real disillusioned with all this shit in the war. And even though it wasn't written at the time, no doubt he's feeling backlash for the whole Ahsoka thing about how the council basically drove his beloved Padawan, and he loved that girl. He did. But his beloved Padawan driven out of the Order because of the way they pounced on her that they did, you know? The reason Anakin wanted to be on the council, wanted to be a master, is because he'd been having those prophetic dreams where Padme dies. He can't tell how she dies, but we know she was dying in childbirth. And the only thing on his mind is, I have to save Padme. I will do whatever it takes to save Padme. And he knows that if he's a master, he can access the secret Jedi archives that only masters can get. And when he hears the Jedi say, we're going to put you on the council, he thinks, yes. As soon as this meeting's over, I'm going to stroll down there, walk into the archives, and find out everything I can. And then they say, we do not confer upon you the rank of master. And what we hear is, you're not going to be a master. What he hears is, and your wife is going to die. So again, you got to read the books to really know what's going on in Star Wars. And someone, invariably in the comments, and it's not the same guy, but I've had the same exact conversation 3 or 4 times, telling me, no, Star Wars is a movie franchise. I said, no, Star Wars is a franchise that has movies. You know? But they say, you shouldn't have to read the books to know it, or if you do this, it's not a good movie. I'm like, it's not supposed to be a movie. It's part of a franchise. That's like saying, I shouldn't have to watch the season to understand the season finale. And there are shows where that's the case. But, for example, if I jump into Deep Space Nine, or better yet, let's do another thing. Let's say I turn on Star Wars or Star Trek Discovery. I've never seen it. I have half-assed, broken information at best about this show, because I've avoided it, because when I eventually do see it, I want to see it blind. If you were to show me the season finale of Season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, I would be lost. I would have zero fucking clue who these people were, what they're doing, why it mattered. But that wouldn't make it a bad show. That wouldn't make it a bad episode. It's not their fault, it's my fault for not watching the episodes that came before it. You know? If Star Wars were just a movie series, then yes, that could be a thing. But Star Wars is kind of unique in that it's all canon. Marvel. Let's talk Marvel. It's the same company. It's all Disney. Marvel is, of course, a comic book company. When you read Civil War, it ties in with all the different things, like Deadpool's in Civil War, Iron Man's in Civil War, the new Avengers are in Civil War, etc. And of course, there's a movie version, Captain America Civil War. But the two aren't canon to one another. Nothing that happened in the comic Civil War pertains to the movie and vice versa. There is a HeroClix set, which is a miniatures game of Civil War. But not all the characters are in there. For example, Penance, who was a big deal in Civil War, isn't in it at all. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel, who had nothing to do with it, is one of the limited edition figures. Likewise, so is Black Panther, even though he wasn't on either side in the Civil War. He was getting married at the time. You know? So, Marvel Comics are canon to the comics. The movies are canon to the movies. The games are canon to the games. And the books are canon to the books. And there are books. Like, for example, there's a really good Fantastic Four novel. Has to do with the Silver Surfer. I don't remember what it's called, but I want to look it up again someday. But the gist of it is, there's an antimatter universe, which is canon to the comics. And one of the Fantastic Four's enemies, Blastar, comes through from the antimatter universe and basically begs the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer to come help. There's this horrifying being there. It turns out that it's the Antimatter Galactus. And they're thinking, oh, we got to stop this horrible thing. He's killing worlds. Well, Antimatter Galactus doesn't kill worlds. He instills life in them. He goes to dead worlds, or dying worlds, rather, and gives them life. And the Fantastic Four and Silver Surfer hear this, and they think, really? That's not villainous, and they leave. And Blastar's just having a fit, because he's like, no, you don't understand. We got to stop this guy. He's terrible. And they think, Blastar, you're full of shit. Well, Surfer goes back to one of those worlds, and he finds out that this creature instills a planet with so much life that it chokes to death on it. It's like having a starving person eat an entire turkey at once. They're going to choke. You know? Like, you're putting more in your mouth before you finish swallowing what you had. Eventually, you're going to die, and that's what he does to worlds. And it was a really good book. And it has no bearing on a goddamn thing. There's a fun Spider-Man book called The Venom Factor, where, you know, Hobgoblin has stolen stuff to make a nuclear weapon. And there's this weird alien creature that looks like the symbiote, but it's not. It's a little bigger. It's meaner. It doesn't have the spider symbols. And it's animalistic. It has no intelligence at all. And it's also stronger than the symbiote, and it eats radiation. Well, Venom hears about this thing because it's been in the sewers just killing homeless people, and he doesn't like that. So he and Spider-Man reluctantly team up. They fight Hobgoblin. They fight the monster. You know, it's all wrapped up. Everyone goes home fine, you know? But you'll never find that creature in any of the comics because he's not canon to the comics. He didn't happen. He doesn't exist. He's only from that novel. And Star Trek's the same way, and I imagine Doctor Who is the same way. But Star Wars isn't. You know? Like, You'll find something in the books that'll appear in the games and something that debuted in the games that shows up in the books. Like, I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure Kyle Katarn was from the video games. I'm sure that was his first appearance. And he features heavily in the books. He's a big deal there. Matter of fact, Kyle Katarn, before Rogue One came along, was the canon explanation of where the first Death Star plans came from. He was sent by the Rebels on a mission to get those plans, and he got them to Leia, who got them to the Rebels. You know? In the pre-Disney canon, Vader's second apprentice, his Sith apprentice from Force Unleashed, is the one who put the rebellion together. You know, that's a big deal. And Star Wars just doesn't operate on the rules that everyone else does. And that's why I say, I completely lost track, but he basically says you shouldn't have to do all this homework and shit, and I basically responded with, if you love Star Wars, it's not hard work. It's easy to do. It's something you want to do. If you love Star Wars, you will seek out the books. Libraries exist. You think I got money to buy books? I don't. But you know what I got? I got a library card. So I'll go there and I'll check out books, or more recently, I'll check out audiobooks and listen to them. You know? Free. As long as you get your shit returned on time. Doesn't cost you anything. And there are libraries all across the country that you can get these books at. And it doesn't matter if your library doesn't have them, because my library hasn't had half these books. But you know what? Other libraries in the county have, and they will ship them to my library for me to check out. So, I've mentioned several times that there's another character that I think is the worst in Star Wars, so let's talk about him right now. C-3PO. I hate 3PO so much. I've never really liked 3PO. Before the prequels, I wasn't too big on R2 either. I didn't mind R2, but I didn't like him either. However, the prequels showed me what a fucking heroic character R2 really was, and always has been. Like, it showed his heroic past, and brought to light to me all the heroic shit he did in the original trilogy that he didn't have to do, but he did anyway. You know, even when he's scared, he really doesn't hesitate more than a moment before jumping into the fray. But 3PO? 3PO is a coward. 3PO is dead weight. 3PO hurts more than he helps. He just does. He's a bad character. Everyone complains about Jar Jar and how Jar Jar's not funny, but he's shoehorned in for comedy. I don't find 3PO funny, and he's shoehorned in for comedy too. But here's the thing. Let's say I level with you. Let's say that I agree that Jar Jar Binks is the worst Star Wars character ever, and that 3PO's number 2. You can get away from Jar Jar. Don't watch The Phantom Menace. Hell, there's a version called The Phantom Edit that cuts out most, if not all, of Jar Jar's scenes. He doesn't say more than a couple of words in Attack of the Clones. And all he says in Revenge of the Sith is, "Excuse me." You can skip the episodes of Clone Wars he appears in, and still get 80% of the show, and not miss a whole lot of important things. But 3PO... 3PO is in episodes 1 through 8. Might be in episode 9 too, I don't know. He's in Rogue One. He has his own show called Droids. He appears in the Clone Wars. He appears in an episode of Rebels. He's in a lot of the games. He's in most, if not all, of the books that take place in that era. And you can't get away from him. If you're watching Star Wars, he's there. Waiting. Waiting to ruin it. And I said in the guy's comments, I said, if 3PO's on screen, there's an 80% chance or if 3PO impacts the plot, there's an 80% chance he's making things worse. a 19% chance that whatever role he's performing could be performed by subtitles, and a 1% chance that another character is using him as a prop to accomplish something. Vader's accomplishments in the original trilogy dwarf what Threepio has accomplished. Period. And I've used Threepio. Remember the thing about the actress who played Rose? I said that I hate Threepio. I think Threepio is the worst character ever. But if I met the actor who played Threepio, who, as I recall, was responsible, partly, for how Threepio has been portrayed in the series, where without this guy's input, we would have had a different Threepio, more akin to Hades from Disney's Hercules, which would have been infinitely better. But from what I understand, the actor was responsible for stuffy, cowardly British Threepio. If I met this guy, I wouldn't hate him. I wouldn't be mad at him. I'd tell him I don't like the character, but it's not your fault. You know, it's not, you didn't write the script, etc. If I could, I'd get an autograph and a picture, and I'd go on with my life. And I could say, I hate C-3PO, but his actor's okay, or I hate C-3PO, and man, his actor was a dick. But those are still separate things in my mind, you know? The actor's not a dick because 3PO sucks. The actor is a dick and 3PO sucks. Or the actor's cool and 3PO sucks. See, I just wanted to talk Star Wars for a bit. I wanted to ramble. And, yeah, I had mentioned in the comment that I had left that you'll find Star Wars fans who hate everything. There's Star Wars fans who hate the original trilogy. There's, of course, people who hate the prequels. And I mentioned this thing about how, oh, this ruined Star Wars, this did this. And I followed it with saying, you're probably thinking I'm talking about the prequels, aren't you? Because either that's your thought, or you know a lot of people who think that, but I'm actually talking about New Jedi Order. Because way back in the day, when Star Wars was still young, when the prequels were still kind of fleshing out, I was on Star Wars months, and the way you got people fired up was mention the New Jedi Order. Because this is before prequel hate really became a thing. I mean, there were people there, but not to the big thing that they are now. And the New Jedi Order was widely despised by like 80% of the player base. And it's just like, oh, they killed so many characters, they did this, they changed everything that Star Wars was. Because here's the thing with Disney. Disney didn't do half the damage to the Star Wars franchise that I think New Jedi Order did. New Jedi Order took everything Star Wars was and flipped it on its ass. You know? They just completely judo tossed it into a pool full of sharks. And even then, that didn't ruin Star Wars. By far, it wasn't my favorite era, despite being full of Jedi. But I could still read it. That being said, I've only gotten like 5 books in, but that's mostly because I kept losing my audiobooks, or I kept getting distracted, you know. But, yeah, it is what it is. So, thanks for putting up with my rant. See you guys.